for the 10th episode of Coffee Table Conversations, a collaborative approach. It's the 81st day of lockdown, and as a nation, we have decided to take the virus head on by calling it either Unlock 1.0 or Mission Begin Again. But was opening a correct move, or we are heading towards a strong spike? While the jury is out there, but the politics around it is tensionful. 2020, in my view, is a path-breaking year. It has cut open the dark sides of society, which most of us chose not to see. The divide between the have and have-nots. While in the midst of a pandemic, you see demand to remove racism in USA by a movement called Black Lives Matter, to Hong Kong, where the residents are fighting to protect their democracy. With the extreme rise of rightist politics across the world, from Egypt to Russia, China to Turkey, and India is no exception, we have seen across these countries biggest misuse of legal provisions and extreme crooked IT cells, who are not being made accountable. I'm not sure how many of us are aware, but Facebook tendered an apology to Sri Lanka, where it was found that Facebook platform was used to create disharmony, which led to riots in 2018. It's the same story of Radio Ravanda. While as a society, we are grappling with fake news peddled by IT cells and other handles like Postcard, Political, Kida, amongst others, which are ignored. We tend to ignore the undercurrent growing unemployment. An estimate shows that the unemployment in India has spiked from 6% in March to 27% by the end of May. And we would need to closely see how things will unravel. When the divide between the haves and have-nots increase, you usually see a major change in the society. The Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 is a candid remembrance of the same, and you can see a similarity in various countries across the world. To discuss how the world is changing and how it would impact not only just individuals, but the country, the world, and the society as a whole, we have today as guest speaker, Shri V.P. Raja. Shri Raja is the former chairman of Maharashtra Electricity Regulatory Commission. He is an IAS officer of the 1974 batch, Maharashtra Cadre. He started his career as assistant collector of Nanded. In a span of over 35 years of his career, he held various prominent positions within the state of Maharashtra and with the central government. Pertinent positions to mention are collector and district magistrate of Satara district, Transport Commissioner of Mumbai, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Defense, Additional Secretary, Department of Atomic Energy, amongst others. He retired from service in 2008 as Principal Advisor to the Department of Atomic Energy and then was appointed as Chairman of MERC. He holds degree in MPhil from Social Science from University of Punjab, MA in Rural Development Planning from University of East Anglia, United Kingdom, MA in Physics from Columbia University in New York, BSc and MSc in Physics from St. Stephen College in Delhi. He has also authored several books and publications on zero-based budgeting, state finances and economic reforms. In recognition of his outstanding contribution to public administration, Shri Raja was awarded the P.J. Chinmulgun Distinguished Government Administration Award. Sir currently devotes his time as visiting faculty for Jamal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies and BSc Institute. He is also a trustee with Public Concern for Governance Trust, a charitable organization. Thank you, sir, for joining us this evening. It's such a privilege to see and hear you after so many years odd. To start, I think maybe a scenario building of how things in the post-pandemic area is building up, how the world is looking different and how it will change, a lot of things will change, is something that we like your perspective on.
Yes, certainly the pandemic was unanticipated. Everybody in this audience would never have thought that such a thing could happen. We might have read about the Spanish flu, etc., in books of history, but forgotten it more or less. Of course, in India, we did know about the AIDS virus, the H1N1, and AIDS did impact India quite a bit. But somehow, it didn't affect much of the middle class. And we did though it was quite widespread, but government could tackle it with the AIDS control programs, etc. Things like SARS and MERS and Ebola did not impact India very much. Though I recall that during some of my visits to Japan or Korea, I used to be a bit amused as to why is everybody wearing a mask. Everybody means whether children or adults, even during a normal day. The moment they have a very little running nose or a cough, etc., they used to be in masks. So on any particular day, when you walk on the streets or something, you will find quite a number of people with masks. Not very large, but even a slight. Now I know that those countries learnt it, particularly during the SARS epidemic, which occurred in some of those countries. So yes, COVID-19 was a total surprise. It's certainly something which has impacted the world, the entire world, maybe slightly in different degrees, but by and large quite badly, because unlike the 1929 Great Depression, which Keynes later found was because of, or rather gave an explanation was because of collapse of demand. Because of the COVID-19 and the lockdown steps taken, there has in fact been a collapse of both demand and supply, except for the absolute essentials. So it is still a demand issue. It is still a demand issue, and it is this inevitable conflict. Are more people going to die because of the virus? Are more people going to die because of hunger or loss of livelihood? You see, luckily, our agriculture is quite good. One of the positive things, even in this situation, to remember is that our stocks of agricultural essentials, cereals, are very good. And this year also, we have had a bumper Kharif harvest. That's a very positive thing which we need to keep in mind, that in terms of food grain stocks, not only the stockpiling which we do or the buffer stocking that we do, but even the current Kharif harvest is very, very encouraging. But as Amartya Sen pointed out in his study of poverty and famines, people die not because of want of food. They simply don't have the purchasing power to purchase food. That is, the entitlements go down. And that's a matter of worry in a country like India, where even during normal time, 1/3 of the population is below the poverty line. That is, during a reasonably good agricultural year, 1/3 of the people are below the poverty line. And when monsoon fails, that number goes up to as high as 40–45%. So this, the migrant issue, the reverse migration of everybody going back to the home of the villages, is something which was perhaps not totally anticipated, partly because we now have a government system which has been highly centralized, where perhaps as much consultation as needs to take place in normal administration doesn't take place. So that has to do something with the personalities of the leadership. But even assuming that we did have a consultative system, and civil servants and others advised, the extent to which the migrant movement actually happened may not have been anticipated. Because now with hindsight, we can say that why didn't we give them 3 days or 4 days time? But there are other issues. If you give 3 days and 4 days time, the kind of things that happened in the US, where toilet papers were stocked out. There would have been a rush on retail stores and people wanting to stock up items, etc. So these are difficult decisions, and analysis will continue to take place. Having said that, I must say, as far as India is concerned, economically speaking, it was in a bad state even before the virus hit us. I will say post-demonetization, it has been going only down and down, going southward, the economy. Perhaps of steps taken, intentions may be good, but the practical world is very different from the world of good intentions. And so economy was quite bad. Other thing is, throughout the world, something which Neil also mentioned in his introductory remarks, the so-called neoliberalism, which became the mainstream throughout the world, which started with Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan around early 1980s, that became the mainstream in the last 40 years. In fact, the first questioning of that started to take place only after the publication of Thomas Piketty's book, Capital in the 21st Century, the English edition of which came in, rather the English translation of which came in 2014. So it was post 2014 that inequality, whether neoliberalism or the so-called Washington consensus, has led to great increases in inequality. Even in the academic world, these discussions started only after the Piketty book came, which means just 5 or 6 years. And in the general debate, it came only during the last US elections. But there were other issues, and obviously the mainstream was in favor of a kind of a disgust with the existing ruling establishments, a feeling that the elites have usurped the world and they don't really bother about us. Immigrants have taken away jobs. It's not the truth or the untruth which is important. The narratives which got built up created vote banks in favor of the narratives created. That happened in US with Donald Trump getting elected. It happened with Brexit in UK. It happened in France with an unknown person who didn't belong to any major political party becoming the president of France. It happened very much in India. The polarization in India was built up obviously on divisions and our so-called ancient culture and basically divisions based on religion. But as Neil pointed out, it can be called as a right backlash to what was thought as left liberal, neoliberal views, which were prominent in the last 20, 30 years. So today we are facing a world where besides COVID, the pandemic, there are other issues, political ideologies, geopolitics, what is happening between US and China, this recent tensions between India and China, what is happening in Hong Kong. So one thing is clear, that the COVID has reduced the power of everybody. Politicians are scared whether they will lose power. Individuals are scared. The economy is in shambles. As far as India is concerned, my opinion is that we have two viruses which are perhaps even more what can be called as dangerous. than the COVID. The COVID will go away either through herd immunity or through discovery of a vaccine or a combination of both. But there are two other viruses which can do a lot of harm to this country. One is the virus of corruption, which has not come down. It's the methodology of corruption has undergone changes, but corruption has certainly not come down, it has increased. Changes of governments have not reduced corruption. They only changed the methodology of corruption. So corruption continues to be a very major virus which can wreck our country. And second is communalism. So corruption and communalism are viruses in India which we need to tackle. I don't want to give too much explanation. Imagine the kind of things that were happening just before the lockdown. Divisive politics, or even now what is happening. We are still fighting the virus, but kind of election campaigns by the main party in power have formally commenced in both Bihar and Bengal, and see the narrative that is getting built up. These are dangerous things, which can, anything which divides people is dangerous. In a certain sense, something like that is happening in the US. This racial issue brings out something very important, and that is many societies do have some fault lines. And it's because of leadership that the fault lines have been kept within control. But when politics themselves encourage divisions, these fault lines split open. Slavery was abolished in the US, even though in some states, like in the state of Alabama, it got abolished. The so-called busing both white and black children together to school, if I remember from memory, happened only around 1964 or 65. There was a governor there called Wallace, and apartheid continued in America. Segregated busing of school children continued till about 1964. But the moment the kind of incident that occurred a few weeks ago, you can see how these fault lines can completely rupture. And that is the danger when we allow divisive forces to prosper, or when the government in power, through the institutions which are under the control of the government, uses those institutions for a political agenda. I'm a member of a group, later I can send those details to Neil for further circulation, of a group of retired civil servants called the Constitutional Conduct Group. We often don't make, you can find it by doing a Google search, Constitutional Conduct Group. And recently, just 2 days ago, we have issued an open letter saying stop the vilification of Harsh Mandar for the speech which he made at Jamia, which was, Harsh Mandar is actually an apostle of non-violence, a Gandhian basically. But his speeches were taken out of context, parts of it was made, and the police files a complaint calling it a hate speech. While the real hate speeches, which were heard in all the television channels and media, those people, even FIRs have not been filed. And when a particular judge has asked the police, when are you going to file the FIRs? He was summarily transferred to another high court overnight. These are, which means some of the most important institutions of our country, including the Supreme Court, are they really doing the constitutional duty? These are all questions which are of grave importance, irrespective of COVID or no COVID. I repeat, COVID will get eventually sorted out through herd immunity plus a vaccine, whichever comes first, or a combination of that. May take 1 year, may take 2 years, may take 3 years. But these other viruses are dangerous and we should not lose our guard on it. Only yesterday, Jimmy Carter made a similar statement. Jimmy Carter, the ex-president of US, is now 95 years of age and his wife is 93. They issued a statement that at this age, both of us realize the crime of, what is the crime of silence? He says, during the worst Nazi time in Germany, people who could be counted as belonging to that ideology of Nazism was only about 6 million. But how come the 60 million Germans kept quiet, who didn't believe in that ideology? And 6 million Nazis could gas and kill 6 million Jews. This is what Jimmy Carter has just stated yesterday or day before. So we are in a complex society. I gave this background only to say that when we think of COVID, we can't think about it in isolation. There are other geopolitical issues where the entire world is changing thanks to those geopolitics. Even on Indo-China, there is obviously a bigger reason as to why this is happening. But it's not good to speculate on that, particularly when some kind of negotiations are going on. Just a few hours ago, I was hearing our former National Security Advisor, Mr. Shiv Shankar Menon, being interviewed by Karan Thapar on this Indo-China standoff. That's an interesting interview. Now coming to COVID, with this, because I had said that let's do a scenario building on COVID. By scenario building, I mean everybody attending this needs to do it on their own, because there is something for the overall economy, for the country, for the state, for a village, for some place like Mumbai, and for individuals. The situations in which we are placed are not really identical. It's wrong to say that we are all in the same boat. We are not in the same boat. And that's what this, urban-rural migration of migrants brought out, that we are not really in the same boat. So much depend. We are, some of us who still are able to get our vegetables and milk more or less delivered to our building, if not to our doors, are certainly in a different category than people who have lost their livelihoods. So we are not in the same boat. Having said that, this perennial battle of livelihoods versus the virus is what has led governments to unlock. Now, what happens to, there are certain obvious things. There are certain kinds of industries, certain kinds of businesses, which will take a very, very long time to revive. And many of them will not be able to survive for such a long time. So they're bound to close down. Things that come immediately to mind is airline industry, the tourism industry, hotels. Of course, hotels may change the property to certain other use. These are things which will take a longer time. An expression which is often used now, which has become fashionable in the academic discussions on this subject is, will the recovery be V-shaped, U-shaped, or butt-up shape? V-shaped means the collapse was immediate and the recovery will also be immediate. May happen in certain businesses. But the more likely recovery in many businesses will be U-shaped, a slow recovery. And certain industries like airlines may actually be butt-up shape. And certain things will certainly not go back to the status quo ante. Now, we are now discussing over the Zoom. As all of you are aware, I understand the Zoom had a consumer base or people about 10 million or so, which the last I heard has gone to over 300 or 350 million. Some of this will survive. So corporate travel will not certainly take place in the same way it was taking place before COVID. Now that impacts the airline industry very badly because their income really came from corporate clients, from people who travel, let us say, take a morning flight from Bombay, go to Delhi, finish the work and come back by the evening or night flight back to Bombay. That's corporate travel. And similar kind of travel was taking place throughout the world. You travel to Europe, come back, and that's where the maximum money was being made by the airline business. But even when things normalize, I don't think corporate travel will go back to the level at which it existed before COVID. Thanks to Zoom. And now a lot of work will be done to make these platforms. And now in the last 2 months, I myself, in one way or the other, used Zoom, used Google Chat, used WebEx, used GoToWebinar. At least 4 of these platforms I've used. And with every use, I find some extra features being added to it. So hectic work is going on. And if you can achieve your business without having to travel, obviously that's going to come down. So literally, it is necessary to do an industry-wise analysis. Some are very obvious. A fairly close friend of mine and a distant relative of mine, he was in the business of perfumes. And perfume is a business where the margins are very high. It's almost 400% margin, etc. Because it is the design of the perfume bottle which is even more important than the contents. Now he was able to shift from perfumes to sanitizers in a very short period of 5 or 6 days. And to say that the demand for sanitizers have really skyrocketed but he was basically dealing with chemicals. He's a chemist and a chemistry man. So he could get the vendors, he knew the sources. The people who were sourcing for these perfumes, he used to do a lot of source. So those sources were still available and he could shift from perfumes to sanitizers in a small period of 4 or 5 days. Now, that is why some businesses will close, some will recover in a V shape, some in a U shape, some in a bathtub, and some will exit. Some will get destroyed. And this kind of analysis, more and more such analysis will be coming out. In fact, I will send Neil this. Just half an hour ago, I was seeing a survey of Fortune 500 CEOs. A survey had been carried of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and a number of questions given to them. And the analysis of the replies have been made. I will send that. Just to give one example, on the question as to how many of the workforce they expect will come back, at least 26% of them say that all of them will never come back. I'm not talking only of India. I'm talking of the entire world. Because in India, we are talking of this urban-rural migration. Please remember, a whole lot of Indians are coming back, right? The first set which is coming back are the people who went on a tourist visa, are sitting there. But at least there is an article today in the Wall Street Journal which says that Trump may say no H-1B visas. Even assuming that people already having H-1B visa will not have to immediately come back, all new H-1B visas will not take place because there is so much unemployment there. So a lot of, much like the urban-rural migration, even across borders, people can come back, and it's happening in all countries. It is happening very much in all countries. So this is, we have to analyze it from the point of view of the industries in which we are. We have to analyze it in terms of the skills which we have. And in case we need to change track, obviously, the SWOT analysis is strengths and weaknesses exist within us and in our team. So each one of us, we know our strengths. And we can also decide ourselves which are the strengths or which are the complementary things which we can develop. Luckily, on the education field, a lot of things have opened out. A lot of things are even available free now. But obviously, even if they are available free, there is this question of how much time you devote to it. Just because webinars are available, you can't keep on attending webinars. You have to budget your time as to what you want to. Perhaps a person at my age can afford to do it. Because my worry will start if government cuts down pension. As of now, they have not done it. So it's the situation in life in which you are faced. So two things. One is certainly you need to make your own analysis. Some of my friends in the airline business have lost their jobs. Some of our students also, amongst the jbims students, not necessarily of the batch which is sitting here, but of many batches since I've been teaching there. Some of them were in the airline business. And some have lost their jobs, some are, depending on the airline they're working. In the US, they've been given time till September. Since in the bailout was to the extent that you have to pay your employees. You can't use this money for any other purpose. But they've all been, the government has bailed out only till September. So the point I'm making is, one needs to ask a number of questions, which in a certain sense are common sense questions. And then ask the question, how do I fit in? There used to be this very small book, which is worth reading. Very, I think, 100-page, 120-page book called Who Moved My Cheese? Does anybody remember the author? The name of the author doesn't come to my mind immediately. The name of the book is Who Moved My Cheese? When something changes, you can't complain. You just have to adjust. Because the cheese which was giving you your livelihood has moved. Now you have to find your own method of, how to grapple with that kind of a situation. As far as government is concerned, see, in terms of theoretical knowledge, in my opinion, we still do not have anything better than what was written by John Maynard Keynes, the general theory of employment, interest, and money. He had gone to the back burner for some decades, but even in 2008, when the financial crisis took place, he was brought back. The so-called stimulus packages were all based on what Keynes had recommended after the Great Depression in the general theory. And today also, in terms of theoretical knowledge in economics, there is no better author than John Maynard Keynes and his general theory of employment, interest, and money. There's only a double whammy now, because it is not merely demand which has collapsed. Supply also, except for essentials, have collapsed. And supply for the others, as I said, will take a longer time depending on the industry, because there is this logistics. Everybody who is manufacturing something has vendors to deal with, has a supply chain with vendors, has customers to deal with. So on the marketing side and on the procurement side, he is very much connected with people. One of the questions often asked is, can we now boycott China? Well, in my opinion, we can't. Because a whole lot of Indian industry sourcing is China. We could do it over a period of time. When I say over a period of time, over 5 years to 10 years. If you do something abruptly, you have to pay a very heavy price for it, an economic price. And this is not true just of India. Why did so many industries go to China in the first place? Of course, the credit goes to China. They put up manufacturing facilities, provided good facilities, and it was a cheap labor thing. And over and above cheap labor, a lot of discipline, thanks to authoritarian government which existed. And how did what is this dependence of US and China? The US people took a lot of loans. In fact, the debt in the US budget is very high. The deficit, the US budgetary deficit is very high. Almost everybody takes a loan, even in the age group. The moment you get married, within 2 years, you're full of loans. A loan for your house, a loan for furnishing your house, a loan for buying a good car. So you are full of EMI responsibilities and mortgage responsibilities by the time you're 30 years of age or even younger. And then you live a life quite comfortable, but you buy Chinese goods. The Chinese cater to that market very well. In addition, they could manipulate the currency rates. So through a combination of currency, manipulation is a negative word. They had a kind of what can be called as government decided exchange rate. So using that, you can always make exports competitive. So money is of US, manufacturing is taking place, and many of the same trend then continue for other industries, whether it is electronics or the internet or solar panels, what have you. Some of my friends, rather of the younger generation, who are involved in electronics, they said that everybody prefers to go to China and set up a facility. So it's difficult for everybody to change it all at once. It's true. For example, Japan, right? The government took a decision that people who put up facilities here will be given a lot of incentive. So one can at best create a roadmap for it. So from the government point of view, coming back to Keynes, government has to intervene. And obviously, government needs to look after people, give demand to them. Many economists say that even what government has done till now is simply not sufficient. In spite of the zero balance accounts and Jan Dhan accounts, etc., which got opened a few years ago, a lot of people are not covered by this. We saw all those problems in trying to handle the migrants. So the first, in terms of prioritizing, the first priority is to provide some money to everybody, depending on the need. Even if there's a little bit of misuse without asking too many questions. But if you bring too much documentation, there is already a problem. As part of PCGT, we had some experience on this, people wanting to go back to the villages, migrants. And in the first set of orders, they had to get a certificate from a doctor that they are not COVID positive. And for this testing, at all the slums in Mumbai, whether it is Dharavi or Mankod, etc., they had to pay about 450 rupees for a test which did not involve a COVID test, where the doctor will just look at your pulse and see whether your temperature, and then give a certificate, a kind of a 10-second job. And for that, he was charging 450 rupees. So more documentation means more, more harassment in a certain sense. Because everybody, these are old practice where for us, you put some conditions and then compliance becomes important. People who are working in law firms, in India, one of the easiest and maximum money spinner is looking after compliances. While big industries have their own team to look after compliances, what does the MSME do? He appoints somebody. By हमारी जो भी compliance देख लीजिए, GST का 4 दफा return, environment का इतना return, इसका इतना return. There may be 100 and odd or more compliances that you have to do, and you have to provide nil compliance even if the answer is nil. So somebody looks after that, and this team charges you obviously for that facility, and he puts that little pencil cross and says, "Saab idhar sign kar dijiye." So this is what I call as paper compliances. So we have developed a nation where it is possible to comply with anything, and on documents everything is complied with. I have a personal experience of this. In Maharashtra, almost every industry, there are a lot of chemical industries in this belt from Mumbai to Pune, Kalapur, were all dumping. So everybody had a pollution certificate on effluents, and yet if you took water from the Thana Creek Bridge, it was completely polluted. The biological oxygen demand was not within reasonable levels. So everybody complies, and yet the objective is not achieved. These is actually a combination of paper compliances, which has become a big business, and corruption. So these habits are not going to change because for COVID you introduce new documentation. Because every document can be purchased. It's in that sense that I mean that we should never forget these other kind of viruses which inflict our society. But having said that, we have to be alert. One of the reasons I joined both PCGT and the Constitutional Contact Group is so that you at least speak about it. So there's no crime of silence. But it is true, if you speak too much, there are consequences which you should be ready to face. So I don't think I to date, for example, don't have the kind of guts that Harsh Mandar has. But I certainly have the guts to support it. So these are decisions as a society. Democracy is important. A system of checks and balances is important. Protecting institutions are important. If the court doesn't protect your fundamental rights, who is going to? Is the question. If the court itself decides what case to fix and what case to postpone. That's very dangerous. I don't have to give examples. There have been a number of examples taking place over the last few years. So there is a connection between all of them. Expertise, yes, one needs to take advice of professionals. They provide important inputs. But please remember, professionals also have limitations. So the final decisions have to be taken by the political leadership, or if it's a company, by the owner of the company. Hearing everybody, hearing professionals. But we must remember that professionals also base their decisions or the conclusions based on some fundamental assumptions. You need not be 100% correct. But in the absence, but you should never take a decision without hearing the professionals. It's a very valuable input. But it's not something like mathematics, where, okay, this is the answer. Nobody can provide an answer. That's why, even on the treatment line of COVID, there is so much of varying views. I think I've talked sufficient to provoke. Perhaps I should now try to answer questions and convert this to.
So what we'll do right now is, we'll open it for questions. Let people either raise their hands and or drop it in the chat box, and we'll take it up. In the meantime, if you remember, we did a small survey on about 80 odd participants from Bajaj to participate, and I'll just like to just quickly run through the survey results, and then there's a follow-up question to that. So about 85 people participated in the survey on the employment assessment that we were doing. Most of them have said that they have not lost their job. A very small percentage, about 9% said that they have actually lost their job. But strangely, if you see, the next part of it is a lot of them, which is nearly half of them, are actually not sure, but they are saying yes, they are anticipating a salary cut. So there's a huge percentage of people who have already factored in to the fact that they are going to face a salary cut in the near future. The follow through is that if you ask, the next question is, are they assuming they may lose their job? And nearly half of them say yes, and another half say no, or they're unsure. They may actually lose their job. So that's a little scary picture that emerges from there. And a huge number of people are saying that this problem should last for about nearly a year or two. There was a last trick question that we wanted to understand, that how people are negative or positive in their thought process, and there were only 2 positive come out points, and rest were all negative, nearly overlapping each other, and nearly about 65% people are actually negative in the current scenario in the pandemic. They are actually sad or upset or pessimist of the future that may come through. So one of the questions that people also have poured in is saying, what should they do in such scenarios where the situations is becoming negative? It will become a little bit more negative in another 4-5 months when the reality of the quarter 2, quarter 3 comes in, of the supply chain disruption from China and etc. So like a small instance I'm giving you, the dongles which are used for internet are currently shortage in supply in India because all of them are imported from China. And the supply chain between China and India have broken down on that end. So there's a massive shortage to that end, and a lot of operators cannot meet your demand. That's the reality, what I understand from my office right now. So that's the reality what is heard. So how should people become like resilient leaders? You know, the question is how you should become a resilient leader or a resilient individual with an optimism looking forward that things may look better.
You see, I won't use the word optimism and pessimism. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. One has to be practical in this. Hope for the best. but plan for the worst. So you need to build those kinds of scenarios. Now, you can become pessimistic. That has more to do with human psychology or what? How do I put it? It depends on if you start thinking that there's something happening. Why is it happening to me? Why should this happen to me? That's pessimistic. But these are what is not in your control. I know it's difficult to laugh at it, but you have to be practical. But how to can human beings change overnight? They can't. That's why that's where today at the age of 72, I'm reasonably composed. But if I look back as to why I appear to be composed, I will say it is because of a lot of learning of philosophy which I did in a younger age. I'm reminded of Bertrand Russell was when he was 82 or 83 was asked by a group of young students in their 20s, "Sir, it must be your deep knowledge of mathematics and literary work which must be giving you happiness." His answer to that was, "My happiness comes from," sorry for having to use this word, "my happiness comes from the fact that I'm able to defecate twice a day with unfailing regularity." And then he was asked this other question. You did a lot of philosophy. If you're an engineer, you can do something with it. If you're a doctor, you can again do something with it. With philosophy, what can you do? And his answer was, "You're right. With philosophy, you can't do much, but philosophy does a lot to you." So, there is a certain spirituality philosophy. Death is inevitable. And when you understand that both birth and death, entire life is a small 70, 80, 90, 100 years, suddenly feeling concerned about it too much. It is something like, are you the center of the world? Or if God were to write the history of the universe, does the human race even matter? So these are two polar kind of mindsets you can have while looking at yourself, while looking at the world. If you become too serious saying that you're the center of the world, you can have problems. I remember in that survey which you have sent me, one question was how to deal with this mental tensions or words to that effect. My answer to the mental tension issue is realize that no, you're not the center of the universe. That we happen to be in this planet Earth, which is a small planet in our solar system. There are thousands and thousands of solar systems in the universe. So everybody is dispensable. You're not indispensable. That kind of a mindset. Otherwise, read the Bhagavad Gita, but you need you see, I must tell you a true story of something which had a great impact on me. You see, as a student in my younger days, my subject was basically physics and mathematical physics. So physics and maths. I did MSc Physics from St. Stephen's in Delhi, then went to Columbia University in New York, where I did another MA in Physics. When you do pure sciences, they give MA. And when you do engineering, they give MS. So I got an MA. So I was quite passionate about physics. So I asked one of the professors, we all as students at Columbia always used to have one professor named as your counselor. You can go to him for anything. And so I went to a good, professor of physics who was also my counselor. And in physics, one of the things you learn in higher physics is, for every symmetry in the world, there is something which is conserved. And conversely, for every conservation law, there is some symmetry. To give an example, laws of physics are invariant in space, which means if I do an experiment in Mumbai and I do the same experiment in New York, I'll get the same result. This happens because of symmetry in space. Similarly, energy is conserved because of symmetry in time. Something called parity is conserved because of mirror image symmetry. When you look at yourself in the mirror, please remember, you can never get to that mirror image by any number of translations or rotations. If you show your right hand, what you see is the left hand in the mirror. And you can't move this in any fashion to get that. So something called parity in physics is conserved. So I went to my professor and asked him, sir, what is, and I would have been about 1970, so 22 years of age. So what is more fundamental for understanding the universe? Symmetry or conservation laws? He looked at me. It was in his room. He got out of his chair, went back to his shelf where he had a number of books, picked a book and gave it to me. And you said, you read this book. It will take you some time. And after you read the book, irrespective of how much you have understood, perhaps after a week or 2 weeks, you come back and we'll discuss your question. I'm 22 years of age. The book he handed over was this book called The Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, The Critique of Pure Reason. In that, Kant asked the question, not how is mathematics possible, but how come it is possible? Or why should the world follow laws of nature? Not whether there are laws of nature, there are laws of nature. But how the hell, why should the universe follow laws of nature? And then he comes to tentative answers, and these often referred to as the Copernican revolution in philosophy. That is, he comes to the answer that space and time are part of the subjective apparatus and not part of the objective world. The point is, and a lot of Western philosophy, post-Kantian Western philosophy, tries to answer these queries which Kant raises. The reason I am mentioning this incident at the age of 22 is, this physics professor asking me to read Kant's Critique of Pure Reason had an immense impact on the way my mind worked thereafter. So I entered philosophy through physics, but through Kant, I got interested in other philosophers. Because Kant says, what you see is only the reason can help you only to understand the world of appearance, not the reality. Then the question is, what is the reality? Or in German, he calls it, what is the ein Ding, ein sich? What is the thing in itself, which you're not seeing, whose reflection you're seeing in your perception or in your mind? So that gets answered by Schopenhauer in one form, by Bishop Berkeley in another form, etc., etc. The point I'm saying is, I entered philosophy through Kant, and then from the age of 22, I started reading philosophical texts. First in Western philosophy, and through Western philosophy, I entered Indian philosophy. Because I found a lot of similarities between the works of Kant and the works of Shankara, Adi Shankara in India, who propounds the Advaita Vedanta. So, all this was happening in my mind in my 20s, starting from the age of 22. And from 22 to about 30 or so, I would have been reading very widely, eclectically, a lot of philosophy. Today, at the age of 72, if I don't get very much concerned with what happens, including COVID, of course, I do take precautions that I should not pick it up. But whatever precautions WHO or the government says, nothing more. But I sleep well. I mean, I don't have a thing what will happen. Now, obviously, as I said, I sleep well because as of now, I'm still getting my pension. Whether I'll be able to continue to sleep well if pension stops, I don't know. No, I must confess. So people attending this, they are not in a situation like mine. They have a job, they're getting a salary, they're getting some income. What happens if that income comes down? Well, for a short while, you have to manage with reduced expenditure for a short while. Simultaneously, you have to see what else you can do. Another friend of mine has actually started courses, online courses, for which he's charging fees because he's good in that. So he hopes that he will get customers. So you have to see which are the areas where you may be able to make up the. You can't do it overnight. But if you're losing 20% of your income, immediately you have to manage with that reduced income and simultaneously think, how can I improve my chances? So for that, depending on the skills which you already have, with a little additional skills, where are the new job opportunities? So you have to keep your eyes and ears open. But one thing is clear. 2-3 things are happening. The industries, Indian industry, because of what I can call as labor laws, which were pro-organized labor, for a very long time, for over 30 years, had been following a technique of outsourcing and merchandising. By the way, before joining the IAS, I myself worked for about a year and a half with DCM data products, Delhi cloth mills. And the son of Bharatram, Vinay Bharatram, had started a new unit called DCM data products. The first product they produced was this Moscal 1400 electronic desk calculator. Since we are only 6-7 people, everybody knew everything. From procurement to marketing, we knew everything happening. Very small, these days you call it a startup. In those days we used to call it a screwdriver technology. Because almost everything was imported, only the plastic cover was being made by a company called Bright Plastics in Mumbai. And you needed a plated hole circuitry that was done by a company called Cadre and Gole in Bangalore. Everything else was imported. But the total cost of making that machine was about 1,500 rupees, and we were comfortably selling it for 8,500 rupees a piece. A huge markup. So then, since the profit on that was very good, Charatram, who was the chairman of our board of, our board of this data products company, in a meeting said, if you're doing so much, and those were days of the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Commission. The government had given us license only for 2000. I'm talking of the year 1972. They had given us only permission to make 2,000 such machines in a year. But we are making huge profit. So Chartram asked a question, why can't we make more? So he was told license only for 2,000. He said, okay, we will put 20, 30 people and ensure that they get licenses. and we will ask them to make it. We will do quality control and sell it as DCM products. This is what is called merchandising. And then 15-minute discussion. Will it be a violation? The law officer was called in. The law officer said, sir, give me a few minutes. He said, no, this is a gray area. If 30 others get licenses and we do quality control and only provide them marketing help, whether it violates the MRTP is a gray area. Is it okay? Suppose the matter goes to court. One of our competitors, somebody takes us to court. What is the maximum fine? He calculated, he said some 20 lakhs. And what is the extra profit we would have made? Something like 5 crores. Go ahead. All these discussions would have lasted 15 to 20 minutes. That's all. Decision taken, go ahead. This is 1972. But the private sector in India substantially has followed this pattern. In case of vendors, you have ancillaries, you help ancillaries, and they supply various components and parts to you. Marketing, you merchandise. Shirts, a shirt which I'm wearing very likely would have been stitched in the mezzanine floor of Dharavi or Baikula. Only the design and that, so the shirt would have cost 200 rupees, but I sell it at 2,500 rupees. Now, because of all this migration, reverse migration which has taken place, only every factory will know how many they are going to get back. Every factory owner will decide. Owners who want, obviously one of the reasons they went back is they would not have been paid when the lockdown commenced. But the owner who wants him back will now promise to pay them the return journey and also some incentives. But the other man will make up his mind whether he really wants to come back. So some may come back, some will not come back. On any case, I don't expect most of the workers to come back before Deepavali. In the urban industrial conglomerates, whether it is Mumbai or Noida or Bangalore or Pune, the people who have left, some of them may be persuaded, some may, but I don't think too much, 25% may come back, but most won't come back before Deepavali. And certain number of people will not come. Now, these things will need to be factored for yourself. So that's why I'm repeating, every industry will have to know their kind of. I've been advising electric companies rather. So I've been telling DISCOMs the same thing. You know your major consumers. The electricity demand has fallen because industry and commerce is the major demand. During lockdown, only residential demand and survived. Agriculture demand anyway is low the moment the monsoon commences. Even AC demand has gone down because in many cases, ACs are not recommenced for fear that till the entire thing is cleaned up, it can spread the virus. So to see how your demand picks up, you have to be in touch with your major consumers, the major consumers of electricity. Be on a one-on-one touch with them. Because how their industry will pick up, on that will be dependent how your demand for electricity will pick up and how much you need to procure. So that is why the supply chain, the logistics, all this come together. So to summarize, as far as mental tension is concerned, philosophy is the answer. Bhagavad Gita is the answer. It's all in your mind. There is no easy method. By just praying, it is not going to go. It is your internal mind. But philosophy will be helpful. Bhagavad Gita will be helpful. I'm talking about Bhagavad Gita because I know the text. There may be other religious texts which are equally good, which give you solace on this. I know Rudyard Kipling's "If" is an excellent poem to recite, which I have often used when in tension. If you can keep your head when all about you're losing theirs and blaming it on you. Just do a Google search. All of you would have studied this poem in school. The poem "If" by Rudyard Kipling is a beautiful poem, very useful to handle such situations mentally. Regarding loss of pay, I've already said, yes, if there is a loss of pay, tighten your belt on expenditure. And that impacts the other industry. Like as the unlock takes place, for some time, people will continue to buy only essentials. People won't suddenly go and start looking for fashion items and, everybody will wait and watch. In my own house, there is often, rather not only house, in our society, there is a debate on when is the right time to let maid servants come in, your domestic help to come in. Of course, as a society, we have decided no. Anyway, let's wait for the lockdown to be over. But even after that, my internal group, the advice I gave was, let the peaking take place. Let us see the statistics. Because various articles say the peak in Bombay may take place only by end of July or so. Even with 10-15% error, some statistics are coming out. In the lack of everything, you have to trust those statistics. And luckily, statistics are being produced by a number of, including Johns Hopkins University in US. So everything can't be wrong. The BMC does have information, not merely on COVID. All crematoria are with them. Burial grounds are with them. So there also there is a column, cause of death. Even with all the errors on those statistics, I said that no question of allowing domestic help till we reach the peak and we start coming down. Now, like that, I'm only one of the members of the managing committee. Finally, I myself don't know when the pressure will come from the ladies. But they're also careful about their own life.
So we have a question. We have a question from Pincy. She's asking, you said compliance exists, but still people don't comply. In such a case, what other measure can government take? How a common person we can do something about it?
Difficult question. That's why I'm a great believer in the fact that ethics is very, very important. Whether you're in business or any profession, the moment you have compromised ethics, you have already become something less than a human being. That's philosophical. So compliance in an ideal world ought to be self-compliance. You know the intention of a law. Compliance are provided under law so that there is an enforcement authority. So as I said, the ideal is where self-compliance is a good thing and there is only a test checking by enforcement authorities. Otherwise, all self-compliance is accepted with a test check, occasional, random 10% you check, etc., etc. But can you repeat your precise question on compliance? I did see it. Now it has disappeared. It's in the chat box.
I'll just read it again for you.
Yeah, read it.
It says, so you said that compliance exists, but still people don't comply. In such a case, what other measures can government take? How as a common person, we can do something about it?
Samadhana Veda Danda. If compliance is not being done, you first send them a letter. Whoever is the enforcement authority, maybe the Pollution Control Board, maybe the person in charge of Employees Provident Fund, maybe the income tax authorities, depending on the nature of the compliance, saying that, that is what is these days, it is called nudge. You try to nudge them rather than being, very forceful. If that doesn't work, enforce the law. The trouble in India is if you make enforcement too much, the so-called license permit Raj comes back. The enforcement Raj comes back. Where it's something like so many inspectors come and they can be paid off. Or they can be wined and dined, so to say. And managers are appointed only to take care of that. Or there are amongst the existing managers in a company, people know who is good at it. And he comes and meets that inspector and says, Abhi saab, aapke seva mein kya karu main? So there is a problem. So the final answer to this is transparency, civic society groups becoming strong, NGOs asking questions. Like on recently, Money Life Foundation has been asking a number of questions on why the cost of N95 masks is so much, why there's black marketing taking place in N95 masks. Sucheta Dalal. But we need many more such Sucheta Dalals. That is, she is head of that Money Life Foundation. So you need more NGOs, you need civic society groups, because it is the civil society which has to bring accountability. But as I mentioned earlier, there are also institutions created under the Constitution or under statutes which have been made under the Constitution, whose job is to do this. It's the duty of every citizen to ensure that these institutions are strengthened. Now, how to do it? Again, civic society. You see, the law, the so-called Indian Penal Code and the Criminal Procedure Code gives powers to a station house officer of a police station to register or file even suo motu, what is called a FIR, a First Information Report. All offences which are listed in the Indian Penal Code, in the CRPC, it is shown what is a cognizable offence and what is a non-cognizable offence. A cognizable offence is an offence where cognizance can be taken by a police constable, by any police officer, even a constable. What is worrisome? If I were to give a recent example, just before lockdown, some mayhem and rioting and deaths took place in Delhi. During the same time when Donald Trump was having this Namaste Trump function in Gujarat, there were riots and killings. Many cognizable offences were committed in Delhi, in East Delhi. No FIRs have been registered. Under the CRPC, it's the duty of the station house officer to register it. If he does not, he is committing a crime of omission. There are crimes of commission and omission. Not doing what you are expected to do under law is a crime of omission. I can multiply examples. I only gave one example of the police. Similar under various laws. So how do you ensure accountability? Only if civic society becomes strong. It's not the duty of citizens only to go and exercise their vote whenever voting takes place. And just before voting, some massive polarization takes place on an issue which gets created. Human memory is short. And then based on that, people vote. And then you forget, no, governance is much more than that. Even today during COVID times, it's very interesting to see that relatively speaking, the countries which have done best are once again the Scandinavian countries. Sweden, Switzerland, Norway, Finland. These are countries where heavy taxation is there. Almost 70–75% of your income is taxed. But people willingly pay it because the governance is so good. There is a cradle to grave social security. These Scandinavian countries managed to achieve what I will call as socialist objectives using market economy principles. They're all market economies. But the ideal socialist objectives are well achieved. Sweden, Switzerland, Denmark, Norway, Finland, the whole set. Look at the statistics on COVID also. Their country is doing well. So it's a complex question, but according to me, the answer is only transparency, education, everybody being alert, use the Right to Information Act, ask questions, don't commit the crime of silence. Yeah. Any other questions?
So there's a question from Rajesh. We can ask him to unmute and ask his question. Rajesh, you can unmute and ask a question.
Yes, Rajesh Bhosle.
Good evening, sir. So my first question is regarding the recent campaign that banned Chinese product. So is there any substance? Is this false propaganda? That's number one question. And number two, recently Modi came up with a campaign called Atmanirbhar. Okay, so is it just eyewash to divert our attention from their inefficiencies? Because Make in India was started 6 years back, but it never took off. These are the two questions. So I have typed those questions in your chat window also.
Okay. The first question, ban everything Chinese. I'm not in favor of that. Because I think this is again trying to appeal to emotions of people. I certainly agree that later when things quieten down, a full post-mortem needs to be done on whether the Chinese delayed giving information on the virus, etc., etc. But I mentioned in my kind of the beginning also that banning everything Chinese is not the answer. On any case, not immediately. You can have a longer-term roadmap which gets related to Atmanirbhar. Atmanirbhar is not a new concept. Please remember, Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, when India became independent, he propagated self-reliance as a major objective. And what is the reason for it? The reason for it was that during those 300 years of imperialism, colonization, the colonies had been stripped. Now recently, 2 days ago, I saw an article that even Robert Clive was a great asset stripper. You know, Shashi Tharoor has written about the damages caused to India during British rule. So Nehru wanted self-reliance because he was against imperialism, expansionism, and colonization. And that is why he created this entire, we must have our own industrial base. We must start our own industries. Some of the modern economists who perhaps either don't know the full history or they know it but are hoping for rewards from the current regime, selectively play the game of suppressio veri, suggestio falsi, and hide certain information. You know, we hardly had a private sector at the time of independence. You could count Tatas and Birlas and Jamlalal Bajaj, that's it. So the public sector was brought. It was started. Second 5-year plan, we did very well. All self-reliance was a major plank on that. So Atmanirbhar, okay, I mean, to be very frank, I personally feel that Mr. Narendra Modi also, when he started Make in India, when he gave the slogan of Make in India, he is certainly a believer, in my view, of self-reliance. He is actually, in spite of whatever is his narrative, he is a socialist. The heroine for Narendra Modi, according to me, is Mrs. Indira Gandhi. And you will notice that neither the BJP or Narendra Modi condemns everybody in the Nehru family, starting with Motilal Nehru and Jawaharlal Nehru, right up to Rahul Gandhi, but leaves out Indira Gandhi. He always compares himself with Indira Gandhi and wants to do better than Indira Gandhi. So I think in terms of motives and intentions, I have no suspicion regarding the Honorable Prime Minister. I think his intentions are good. I have disagreements on the means of achieving it. As I said, I have serious reservations on the means of achieving it. That is this communalism or Hindu Rashtra and all these things. I have obviously a difference of opinion. On corruption also, I have some very straight questions. Electoral bonds was a new methodology, but no, it's not a fair system. But 90% of donations to the electoral bond went to the BJP. Now, the PM Care Fund, you even amended the Companies Act to say that CSR money can be given to the PM Care Fund, but the PM Care Fund cannot be audited, will not be audited by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. I strongly disagree. In fact, the PM Care Fund reminds me of a fund created in Maharashtra when Mr. Abdul Rahman Antule was the Chief Minister of Maharashtra. That was called the Indira Gandhi Pratibha Pratishthan. The Indira Gandhi Pratibha Pratishthan was a private fund belonging to the Antule and his family, but it was made to appear as though it's a Government of Maharashtra trust. And the objectives were very noble, to fund and help artists and musicians and people in the liberal arts, even provide them pension, encourage liberal arts and fine arts in the country, etc., etc. But every decision to whom to fund, what to give, used to be given by Antule. And after people went on a PIL before Justice Lenton, that's when it came out open. There are PILs on PM Care Fund. Right now, the trustees of the PM Care Fund are only the Prime Minister, the Home Minister, and one more minister. There is a provision for 3 more, but they are not being filled. So, and with amending the Companies Act that money can go, and the purpose is noble, purpose is COVID. But who takes decision what is to be funded? How come the migrant labor travel was not funded? So there are a lot of questions. Now, I don't know what is right or whatever I'm saying may be completely wrong. My question is, why don't you come out transparent about it? Let the CAG audit it. Let the audit reports be made public. It won't be made public tomorrow, after a year, from where the money came, how the money was employed. Same with electoral bonds. So, to summarize, Atmanirbhar is a good concept. It's not a new concept. And I honestly believe, at least in intention, the Honorable Prime Minister is sincere about it. Whether he'll be able to achieve it, I don't know.
So just to add to your PM Cares Fund, yesterday one of the reports which Business Today carried is it's going to be audited by some company called SARC, which is originally owned by Sunil Kumar Gupta, who's supposed to be extremely close to the BJP politicians as such, and he's also audited. So that's come yesterday in the news.
See, a fund which has collected public money has to be audited with the Controller and Auditor General. There is a PIL pending, but the trouble is the Supreme Court may not list the matter. You know, that's why institutions are important.
Ideally, I agree with you, sir. So, but lately, if you see Supreme Court, there's something completely wrong about, or the system has been manipulated for that matter, because all the important PILs have been put on back burners, maybe 370 for that matter, 35A for that matter, electoral bonds for that matter. They all have been kept in back burners, and you have a media channel whose interim bail application for joining and quashing of FIRs is taken on priority.
Yes, yes.
You see that disparity.
And Ranjan, the former Chief Justice Ranjan Gogoi, joining the Rajya Sabha, tells the entire story. That brings disrepute, or at least mistrust. All these things, a lot depends on trust that the people have. You should not accept such an assignment. On any case, not after, you at least have to wait for a long cooling off.
There's a question.
Normally, a person who has worked as a judge should not accept any such appointment. Where the point is, you're waiting for favors.
There's a question
Why
from
go
Jinesh.
this far?
We'll ask Jinesh to unmute and ask if he can. Okay. But I think I'll ask a question. I think I'll ask the question. He's written saying for small businesses, everything has hit a roadblock. He's speaking about the SMEs and the MSMEs. At home also, I find it more a mental battle than physical one personally. You mentioned the Bhagavad Gita for its everything in one's head. So what will be the strategy trying to hit the normal business as soon as possible, or a sustenance will be more important? How to move ahead post-COVID in this scenario? What will be more important, life or work or survival of the fittest in the model of everything? I think his last sentence is summing everything. In post-COVID scenario, what do you think will be more important? Because MSMEs are hit, SMEs are hit, small shopkeepers are hit. So what will be a priority? Life or finding a job opportunity or working somewhere, or survival of the fittest, as Charles Darwin says?
No, the priority is obviously life is the first priority. You have to sustain yourself. Second priority is getting some livelihood. If that depends on opportunities that present to you. That depends a lot on your contacts, on your previous job. Obviously, you don't start in a vacuum, right? You start with your own networks. And keeping your eyes and ears open. But first is you have to sustain yourself. For that, if it becomes necessary, you have to kind of tighten your belts, your time. Now, after the lockdown started, I'm more or less in my household. We are three of us staying here, and all three are senior citizens, myself, my wife, and my mother-in-law, three of us. But I have accepted voluntarily the responsibility for washing dishes and washing clothes. Of course, we have a washing machine. Washing dishes is a more arduous job because you have to do it at least 8 or 9 times a day. Because the moment you eat, some dishes come. The moment you have a cup of coffee, dishes come. But voluntarily, I've not been doing that because we had domestic help. But now there is no domestic help for the last 3 months. But it takes time. I try my best not to show any irritation.
There's a question from Ashish. This is a topic that you and me have actually discussed a bit also. So I can, if Ashish is there, I'll ask him to unmute and ask. It's an interesting question.
Good evening, all. Good evening, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I just wanted to know that will the technology come into the picture post-COVID, because this is the time wherein the technology can take a paradigm shift and eradicate all the lower paid jobs in India.
Technology is playing a major part. You see, certain things are obvious. There are certain kinds of commerce. As I mentioned at the beginning, one good thing with India is that our food grain stock is very, very comfortable. I repeat, even the current Kharif harvest has been very good, has been a bumper harvest. So, for the immediate time, we have no shortage of food on the supply side. Now, delivering that or making some small value additions to that. What could happen is this migrant labor who have gone back to the villages, a large number of them have skills. Now, what exactly is the skills each of them have? At the moment, we don't have a mapping of it. Only they have. Even though the Supreme Court has given a direction to the states that you must map the kind of skills they have and then decide how you can rehabilitate them or help them back in the villages where they've gone. So this is the time to push in technology quite a bit and see how it can be made more and more user-friendly. Even in the pre-COVID time, in cities like Mumbai, well, all taxi drivers and auto drivers had smartphones, right? And were often withdrawing money from ATM, putting the daily earnings in machines. I don't know whether I answered Ashish's question.
Yes, sir.
Or I evaded it.
No, sir. Yes, you did. Thank you.
So there's Sridhar has
You
a
can
question.
ask a more precise question, Ashish. Come closer to the mic.
Hello. So that's what I just wanted to know. Like earlier, it was said that technology will take away the low-paid jobs. So are we trying to shift the blame game on COVID, or are we trying to keep it precisely towards the technology, that the lower paid jobs will be cut by the technology, or will it be the COVID that will take away the jobs of the lower paid? As in, if you see in Alibaba store or in Tesla store, they all have artificial intelligence working. So will it be in India as well, that all the lower paid jobs will be done by artificial intelligence post-COVID? And how fast
It should not be. You know, for a country like India, we keep on talking about this demography where 50% of the Indian population is below the age of 25. And employment should get a higher priority. I have a feeling that Geo, etc., are trying to do that. For example, from whatever I've read about GeoMart, or the link up that Geo is now going to have, already has with Facebook. From whatever I read, what they are planning is that you book your orders of things and then your nearest Kirana shop will deliver it to you. Which means they are trying out some model where loss of jobs doesn't take place, and the erstwhile, you know, a Kirana shop is owned by it's a small business, and normally he has 3-4 people working for him, and that all those jobs are protected. So any attempt to replace human beings only with technology, with no kind of thought on what is to be done with this human being, is going to create more social tensions in our country. When I say more social tensions, eventually to lead to law and order problems, which you won't be able to handle with police force. So no, employment has to be number one. Technology has to be adjusted to adjust to that employment. You see, the TCS chief has about 6 or 8 months ago written a book on the subject, right? I forget the name of the book immediately. The present TCS, Chandrasekhar, has written as to how you can dovetail technology to India's requirements and also the job requirement. Certain new skills, it is possible for certain skills to be learned in a short time.
That's a digital nation, sir.
Yeah.
That's a digital nation by Chandra.
That's right. You're right. Digital nation. Yeah.
So we have a question.
Any other
from,
questions?
Sridhar, we can ask him to unmute and ask this question.
Sir, thank you so much for coming and giving your time. After listening to you, we understand that philosophy and Bhagavad Gita, Indian philosophy, is a good way can actually be positive. But what are few other steps that we can take, like we are in our 30s, to be a better human being, better employee, better business owner, or bread earners? Like after this pandemic, what are the things that you advise us to do immediately in the short term, or say in 5 years time frame? What are
You see, a better employee, a better businessman, a better industrialist, you can be all that if you're a better human being. Ethics. Ethics should never be compromised. What your inner voice tells you is the right thing to do should never be, what do you say? Your decision making or your thinking should not get changed for any ulterior reasons which have no connection with what you want to decide.
Okay.
How to, in Sanskrit, this is called the sthitak prajna, where your feet is firmly on the ground. How to cultivate that, I don't know. Tomorrow I'm going to watch a webinar by this Manthan group in Hyderabad, where a philosopher is going to talk on this, assistant professor of philosophy. Manthan is a good organization, Manthan India, Hyderabad based. They call interesting speakers, and they were doing it in big halls. After the lockdown, they're doing it at 10:30 in the morning every Sunday. I will send you the link of that. Those, if you're free at 10:30, you can.
Yeah, I have already finished 5 chapters of Gita, so simple ones. But as you rightly said, it becomes difficult for a human being to be grounded and not compromise on your value systems, and so that is what we need to learn. Get your point, sir.
See, read Rudyard Kipling's If. Actually, that small poem called If, in a certain sense, summarizes the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
Okay. Bhagavad Gita I have read in my 20s, and I still read. So I can't claim that I practice all of it.
Okay.
Difficult.
Great, sir. There is a short book which is an easy decode of Bhagavad Gita on Amazon Kindle, which is a free edition. Okay. So I try and read one chapter every day. It hardly takes 10-15 minutes, not more than that.
Good.
It's very clinic.
So in fact, I recollect one book told by sir, that is My Gita by Devdutt Patnaik during our I think
Yes, so I read that book.
semester. Yeah,
Yes, but this is a
yeah.
far better version.
Devdutt Patnaik is a number of YouTubes also. You just go to Google and type out Devdutt Patnaik YouTubes. He has YouTubes on Mahabharata, Ramayana, number of things. You can choose whatever interests you. He tries to put everything in a modern context. He's he has a corporate background, but now has become a chief mythology officer for a number of companies, I think, or a mythology consultant.
He speaks well.
But interesting to listen to.
Sir, I think
Great, sir. Thank you, sir.
we'll move towards the end. I'll ask you those quick 5 questions that I had told you I'm going to ask you. So, one book that you will recommend all of us to read.
I will recommend the autobiography of Bertrand Russell. It's there in 3 volumes. The autobiography of Bertrand Russell. The reason I recommend that is it's written in beautiful English, easy to understand prose. It helps to develop a scientific temper. And he doesn't shy off from discussing the personal conflicts that you face as you grow.
So, in your life,
That's
sorry, I'll take the next question. You want to say something more?
no, I said that's why the autobiography of Bertrand Russell is what I recommend. Yeah.
So, second is one event in your life which you believe changed you as an individual forever.
See, after joining the IAS in Maharashtra Cadre, and after being assistant collector at Nanded and Aurangabad, I came as CEO of the Zilla Parishad at Alibag, very near Mumbai, the so-called Raigad district. And as CEO of the Zilla Parishad, you basically report to an elected body called the Zilla Parishad. And your boss, so to say, is the president of the Zilla Parishad, who is an elected person. When I was CEO of Zilla Parishad, I was about 28. I was there for about 2 years, so at the age of 28 and 29. And my president was a gentleman from the Peasants and Workers Party, which was ruling the Raigad Zilla Parishad. His name was Prabhakar Patil. He's no more. He died some years ago. His formal educational qualification was 4th class pass. He had gone to school only up to class 4. And at the age of 28, what is the kind of background that I carry? A degree from St. Stephen's College, Delhi, considered a very prestigious college. A degree from Columbia University, where I had the fortune of attending courses, at least 3 courses taught by Nobel Prize winners in physics. And here I'm reporting to a boss who is only 4th class pass. Now, during the year that I was there, of course, I found my own strategies of having a reasonably okay relationship. Then an emergency occurred. The emergency was this area, Raigad district, very near Bombay. The main crop is paddy, rice. Now, after the first rains, paddy sowing will commence. Then the paddy will be, the rice will be replanted. So this was the year 1979. That year, the paddy crop faced a pest attack. a pest called stem borer. As the name suggests, in Marathi it is called Kodkida. Kodkida. English name is stem borer. It bores the stem of the paddy, eats up everything, including the grain, major part of the grain, but the outside husk remains as it is. So looking at the field, it will look that harvest is good. But the moment you harvest it and thrash it, you will find there are hardly any grains. Everything has been eaten up by this stem borer. After it has eaten everything, it goes into the pupal stage. It goes back to the stub of that paddy and goes into the pupal stage. So after the harvest is over, this stem borer in the pupal stage is still there in the stubs. If you don't get rid of it, next time when you sow anything, when you plow the field, it will once again go into the larval stage and start eating up whatever you sow. So the only method of getting rid of it is you have to take out all the stumps under the ground manually and burn it. You can't use any machinery because it should not get mixed with the soil. The entire talukas of Alibag, Pen, Panvel, Uran, up to Mahad, all these northern parts of Raigad district were affected by this pest attack of the stem borer. So after discussions, I rushed to Bombay, discussed the matter with the Agriculture Secretary, the Agriculture Minister and the Chief Minister, and got a scheme approved after having first consulted the Zilla Parishad people. Under this very simple scheme, if people bring so many kilograms of the stub and burn it, they will get so many rupees. So you weigh the stubs that have been brought and make immediate cash payment based on the weight of the stub. Now the point is, you must ensure that every farmer does it, because if your neighboring farmer doesn't do it, it doesn't help. So to get this implemented, for about 6 weeks, both myself and the president of the Zilla Parishad, Mr. Prabhakar Patil, we used to leave around 6 in the morning. The moment it becomes, not sunny, the moment it is dawned, you can see light. Either I used to go and pick him up from his residence, or he used to come and pick me up from my residence. Those days we had only jeeps. So we'll sit in the same jeep, and another 3-4 jeeps will follow us with our block development officer and extension officer and some people for distributing this money, keeping accounts, etc. We used to go to a village and a Doundi, that is saying that a meeting will be called, all the villagers will be called together. And Prabhakar Patil used to give a beautiful speech in Marathi explaining what needs to be done and appeal to all adults, both men and female, both men and women, to come out and do this job, and that they will be paid immediately. After organizing that, we leave behind 1 or 2 jeeps to do this work and proceed in our convoy. Our initial convoy would have had 7 or 8 jeeps, 2 will be left behind. We go to another village. So in a day, we used to cover about 5 villages, sometimes 4, sometimes 5, sometimes 6. Somewhere in the range of 4 to 6 villages. And then in one of those villages in between, we'll have lunch. And in the last village, after sunset, we used to have dinner. And then come back to headquarters, which is Alibag, by about 9:30 or 10 in the night. Next morning, again start this at 6 in the morning. 7 days a week for about 6 weeks. Now, while traveling from one village to another, obviously only the 2 of us are there. There will be a driver driving the jeep and the two of us. So we used to converse a lot. And then I found he knew the literature of Karl Marx. He knew M.N. Roy. He knew Indian scholars on that. All through word of mouth. We used to discuss, I have discussed Immanuel Kant with him in Marathi. And we used to have a lot of it. He was basically left of center in his thinking, belonging to the Peasants and Workers' Party. But he knew the intellectual thoughts very well. This experience of 6 weeks made a huge change in me. I learned in those 6 weeks, I learned as much or perhaps more than what I learned from the Nobel laureates at Columbia University. I learned there is so much to learn from a human being. And you don't have to be formally educated. If you're willing to, of course, in my case, I was forced into his company because I was appointed CEO Zilla Parishad and he happened to be the elected president. But this crisis led to a very close interaction for 6 whole weeks and literally the whole day. Of course, when he's giving speech or we're organizing, we are not interacting. But mostly traveling from one village to the other, just us are there. And the driver and one jeep, obviously they don't speak, they're only hearing what we are speaking. But this did a lot to me. It changed my life. I will say that my tolerance increased and that constituted the change it brought out in me is that the pride about my education more or less completely disappeared. I'm proud. I got good degrees and helped. But looking down on others who don't have that kind of education more or less disappeared. And I'm grateful to God. This happened to me when I was 29 years of age. It helped me later in my career a lot.
So this is a very interesting story. Very, very interesting experience. So as a mentor to anybody, what advice have you given to your mentees?
Never be judgmental about human beings. Celebrate diversity. Perhaps coming out of the same experience which I just now explained. All human beings have something. Look at the strengths. Ignore the weaknesses. Weaknesses means you don't belong to that value system. But there's no reason for you to condemn them for that. Never be judgmental. Everybody is a creature of God and celebrate the diversity.
So that's Bhagavad Gita. That's actually Upanishad, 4th chapter if I'm not wrong. I can't recall it, but that's Upanishad. So I'll do last 3 questions and these will be quite lighter in note. So first, I really am very curious. So I normally ask everyone this question that as a successful person, what is your daily routine?
To be very frank, I have no fixed daily routine. I normally get up around 5 o'clock or so. When the lockdown was not there, I used to go for a walk to the Worli Sea Face for an hour or so. I will go from my house, which is opposite Podar Ayurvedic College. I go to the sea face. I cross the Sea Link bridge, go till that area which has now become a containment zone, the Worli village, Worli Gaon, and then walk right up to the Dooth Dairy on the other side, and then come back home. So that one round, end to end, used to take about an hour. And then have my bath and get ready for work. When I was teaching it, of course, when I was working, I had offices to go to. After all my retirements from MERC, my BSc institute classes used to be either in the morning from 10 to 1 or from 2 to 5. And jbims classes used to be in the evening, since I'm basically teaching the part-timers. So on at least 4 days a week, I used to go because my practice in all the courses used to be to front load my classes so that I finish early. So on an average, 4 days a week, I used to go. On the days I don't go to work, there's always this little errands which you have to do yourself. Going to a bank or doing some shopping and that kind of thing. So nothing very spectacular. And normally I watch the headlines of the 10 o'clock news, and after the headlines, sleep off. I don't normally watch the 10 o'clock news fully, but I do watch the headlines. So by about 10:15 or 10:30, I sleep, and I sleep very fast. That is the moment I lie down, within 2 minutes, I'll be fully asleep. There's no tossing around in bed. So
but when do you read? When do you read?
I read whenever I get time. So on an average, about 2 to 3 hours of reading every day, even now. But need not be continuous. I used to read much more in my younger days, in my student days. And when I was working as an IAS officer, most of my reading was related to the work that I was doing. There were files to be gone through, so I used to bring files home and work. At the time, I didn't have the luxury of sleeping at 10 o'clock. Till the files are done, you do it and then sleep. Even if it becomes 12 midnight or...
All right.
What the schedule I gave you was my post-retirement schedule.
It's perfect. I'm not going to ask you the last 2 questions because you said you are doing the dishes lately. So that's one unique thing you're doing in this lockdown for sure.
Dishes and washing clothes.
Washing clothes. But that's an interesting question.
Of course, I put it in the machine. The time-consuming aspect is drying it up. That is, after it is spinned, you have to take it out and put it outside somewhere.
It's a very interesting question which has come from Princey. So I'm going to ask you that. Saying if you want to relive a moment in your life, what would that event be?
You're talking of an event. You see, life is a set of experiences. And since I don't call them as good or bad experiences, of course you feel sad at certain experiences, but with passage of time, there is hardly any difference. Event, yes, perhaps on my jobs, where I got maximum, I enjoyed all my jobs, but where I got maximum satisfaction was as Collector Satara and as Transport Commissioner Maharashtra. So I was Collector Satara 1980 to 1982, and I was Transport Commissioner Maharashtra from 1982 to 1986, which means the period 1980 to 86 were extremely satisfying, and it gave me a lot of personal satisfaction. For example, when I was transferred as Collector Satara, in the biggest stadium in Satara, I was given a send-off by the citizens. And that is a kind of a spontaneous send-off. It was not organized by officials. It came from citizens, and they truly kind of literally with tears coming. And that, not merely the send off, I realized that I had impacted the people as a whole. During those 2 years, by and large, I had visited each and every village in Satara. So that was very good. Transport Commissioner, I was in charge of the motor vehicles department. But I brought about a lot of innovative steps at that time. Improved the RTO offices. Did a lot of things. So my employees and officers appreciated it. Government also appreciated it. There were also a lot of abuse of all India tourist bus permits, where false, bogus permits were being given by Manipur, and buses were flying between Bombay and Bangalore and Bombay and Ahmedabad. These things were stopped. Matters went right up to courts and right up to the Supreme Court, and one managed to convince the Supreme Court of the correctness of one stand. So there were a lot of things. So there also I got a lot of, I was in charge of creating this PUC, pollution under control certification, pollution from motor vehicles, and then rules for carriage of hazardous substances by road. Even now on trucks and all, or tankers, you will see this so-called HASCHEM code, hazardous chemicals code. I have nothing to say on how effectively they are implemented, but many of those new initiatives, a large number of initiatives were taken by me during that period, 1982 to 86. So this period, 80 to 86, was perhaps horoscope-wise the period where my stars shined.
So before I take your closing words, one quick question which came is, if you were not an IAS officer, what would you like to be professionally?
Well, before joining the IAS, when I was in college and all, I was quite clear in my mind that I wanted to be a professor of physics. But after doing physics, I still enjoy reading physics, but I can't do that kind of hard work anymore. But I continue reading things like Scientific American or Current Science, etc. to keep touch. But as I did many years of physics, and as I told you, I was passionate about it, I found it extremely lonely. In the sense, you do something, and what you're doing, you can discuss with 2-3 others. Otherwise, you can't even discuss it because nobody will understand it. So it was, I was feeling a gnawing loneliness. I wanted to see more of the world. I can't explain it anymore. It's all metaphysical. And along with my kind of getting interested in philosophy and reading, etc., that shift took place. But I can't fully explain. But I always wanted to be a professor of physics.
That's an interesting.
Actually, I can say one more thing. I used to be very much impressed by a philosopher called Ludwig Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein was his name. And then I said, if you're passionate about something, your source of living should not be based on that passion. Because the work will take away so much. In fact, it was these kinds of murky thoughts which made me join the IAS. Saying that I must have a stable source of income and then follow my passions. I'm trying to recollect what happened when the shift from physics and academics to the Indian Administrative Service took place. But looking back, I enjoyed every moment. I have no, what did they say? I have no regrets.
All right, sir. I think we are done with this interesting question from Rajendra. Any closing words for you from you, sir, before I close?
No, I've talked quite a bit. All the best to all of you. I think, Neil, I sent you that Sundar Pichai's
Yes, sir. You
commencement address. No?
Yes, sir. You have.
Do pass it on to everybody who has attended today's session.
I'll do that, sir. Anybody who is sending me the email ID, they can just drop it in the chat box. I'll send it across.
Yeah. Sundar Pichai, the head of Alphabet and head of Google, gave a commencement address, which I thought was very sincere and to the heart. And I have nothing better to say than what he has said there to all of you.
So thank you so much. I think this was a 2-hour session. We had anticipated an hour and a half, but we have shot over 2 hours and 15 minutes as such. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing. I think speaking with you, we can go on talking on various topics, and my favorite will remain politics and how there is interlinkage of politics across the world which is happening. But maybe that will be something for some other day. I completely credit you for inspiring me to read a lot of philosophy, and one of the persons I accidentally read was Chidu Krishnamurti, which came from one of your posts, and I loved one of his quotes which says, "We are a second-hand people. We have lived on what we have been told, either guided by our inclinations or our tendencies, or compelled to accept by circumstances and environment. We are the result of all kinds of influences, and there is nothing new in us, nothing that we have discovered from ourselves, nothing original, pristine, clear." I used to always feel that these were extremely powerful words from Chidu Krishnamurti, and very few people know that Indira Gandhi used to go and take advices from Chidu Krishnamurti. And
Yes.
one of the times I remember reading is during emergency, Indira Gandhi felt that I'm doing everything good for India, and she went to Chidu saying, "Why everybody is hating me when I'm trying to do good for India? My intentions are good." And then Chidu replied to her saying, "You have to let things take its own turn. You cannot force things to happen." And then I think after that she withdrew from her the emergency. So that's extremely interesting when I read about it.
That same advice can be given to our present Prime Minister also.
Well, I see similarities between both of them. The dissent.
His intentions are good.
The dissent.
His intentions are good.
No, I agree, sir. But I feel I see a lot of similarities between the way the deflection theory, the divisive rule, and the dissent being killed. It's quite similar way back to Indira Gandhi's times. So, so that's interesting to look at, and how media is curtailed and etc. So we can have all these discussions maybe on politics one of the times when you really are keen to have that one kind of session. But thank you so much, sir, for joining us. This is very up close personal with you, and for you being very candid with us and sharing your journey and your stories from Alibag to Satara, from atomic energy when I heard when you taught us in those days. So it's quite a humbling experience. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you and meet you someday soon after the COVID opens.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.